Email sat in my outbox for exactly 17 minutes before I hit send. 17 minutes of staring at the screen, watching the cursor blink next to my children's names, Jake, Ashley, Emma. The subject line read, "Your inheritance update. Important." The attachment was a receipt from the American Red Cross for $487,000. I should probably start at the beginning, but beginnings are rarely where the real story lives. The real story lives in that moment when you discover your children have been planning your funeral while you're still breathing, dividing up your life's work like vultures over roadkill. It was a Tuesday afternoon in November when I first heard their voices through my kitchen window. I'd been living in the same house in Littleton, Colorado for 32 years, the house where my late wife Linda and I raised our 3 children. The house where she took her last breath 5 years ago, her hand in mine whispering that I needed to take care of our kids. I wish she could see what taking care of them had turned into. "Dad's getting older," I heard Jake say to his sisters as they stood in my driveway. They thought I was napping, but at 68, sleep doesn't come as easily as it used to. "We need to have a serious conversation about his finances." Ashley's voice carried that familiar edge of impatience she'd perfected in high school. "He's sitting on nearly $500,000 in his 401k plus the house equity. That's close to $800,000 total. We can't just let him waste it." Waste it. As if the money I'd earned working 35 years at Boeing, the money I'd saved by eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch and driving the same Ford F-150 for 15 years, was somehow theirs to worry about. Emma, my youngest, the one who used to climb into my lap and call me her hero daddy, delivered the final blow. Maybe it's time we talked to that estate planning attorney Mom's friend recommended. Dad's not getting any younger, and honestly, his judgment hasn't been the same since Mom died. I stood frozen at my kitchen sink dish rag in hand, watching through the window as my 3 children discussed my competency like I was a broken appliance they needed to decide whether to repair or replace. That's when I knew Linda had been wrong. Taking care of our children didn't mean protecting them from life's realities. It meant protecting myself from their greed. The family meeting happened the following Sunday. They arrived together, which should have been my first warning. Jake drove his Tesla, the one he bought after his promotion to senior software engineer at Lockheed Martin. Ashley pulled up in her Mercedes SUV fresh from her morning yoga class in Cherry Creek. Emma came in her husband's BMW because her Range Rover was apparently in the shop. And all 3 vehicles represented more wealth than I'd owned until I was 50. Yet here they were concerned about my financial future. "Dad, we need to talk," Jake said, settling into Linda's old recliner without asking. At 35, he still carried himself with the entitled confidence of the star athlete he'd been in high school before a knee injury redirected his ambitions toward computer science and a comfortable salary. "We're worried about you," Ashley added, perching on the edge of the couch in her $70 yoga pants. At 33, she managed a boutique marketing firm and lived in a downtown Denver loft that cost more per month than I'd spent on groceries in my first year of marriage. Emma, 29 and married to a pediatric surgeon, pulled out a folder thick with papers. "We've been doing some research about estate planning and retirement communities. There are some really nice places where you could have more support." Support. Another word that meant something different when filtered through their financial anxiety. "What kind of support?" I asked, genuinely curious to see how deep this rabbit hole went. Jake leaned forward, his hands clasped in what I recognized as his serious business pose. "Dad, you're 68 years old. You live alone in a 4-bedroom house. You're sitting on investments that could be working harder for all of us, for the grandkids' college funds, for emergencies." "Whose emergencies?" I asked. The question hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Ashley shifted uncomfortably, Emma studied her manicured nails. Jake cleared his throat. Well, you know life happens. Emma and Tom are looking at private schools for the twins. Ashley's considering expanding her business. I'm exploring some investment opportunities. Investment opportunities. I'd heard that phrase before, right before Jake lost $20,000 in cryptocurrency and came to me for a temporary loan that had yet to be repaid. And what exactly are you proposing? I asked, settling into my own chair, the one Linda had bought me for Father's Day 10 years ago. Emma opened her folder with the efficiency of someone who'd rehearsed this moment. We found this lovely retirement community in Highlands Ranch. It's got assisted living options for when you need them, but right now you could live independently. The buy-in is only $200,000, and the monthly fees are reasonable. Only $200,000. As if my life savings were monopoly money. The best part, Ashley added with forced enthusiasm, is that we could help manage your remaining assets. Make sure they're properly invested and distributed. You wouldn't have to worry about any of that complicated financial stuff anymore. They'd done their homework. I had to give them that. They had brochures, spreadsheets, even a timeline showing how my current expenses compared to the more manageable costs of their proposed solution. What they didn't have was any consideration for what I wanted. And if I said no? I asked. The three of them exchanged glances, quick conspiratorial looks that confirmed what I'd suspected since that conversation in the driveway. This wasn't a family meeting. This was an intervention designed to extract my money while painting it as concern for my welfare. Dad, Jake said, his voice taking on the patronizing tone he'd perfected during his divorce proceedings. We're not saying you don't have a choice. We're saying you need to think about what's practical, what's best for everyone. Everyone, not me, everyone. I looked around my living room at the faces of the three people I'd loved more than my own life. The three people for whom I'd worked double shifts when money was tight. The three people who'd never wanted for anything, because I'd made sure they had opportunities I never did. And I realized that somewhere along the way, I'd failed them in the most fundamental way possible. I'd taught them to expect, but I'd never taught them to appreciate. I'd given them everything, but I'd never required them to earn anything. I need some time to think about this, I said finally. Of course, Emma said, closing her folder with satisfaction. Take all the time you need. But Dad, don't take too long. These good retirement spots fill up fast, and at your age. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. After they left, I sat in my empty house, listening to the grandfather clock Linda and I had bought for our 20th anniversary. Each tick felt like a countdown, not to my death, but to the moment when my children would finally get what they'd really come for. That night, I did something I hadn't done since Linda's funeral. I called my financial advisor, Dave Peterson, at home. Dave, I said when he answered, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. If someone wanted to challenge my mental competency to handle my own finances, how would they go about it? The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. Robert, Dave said carefully, has someone suggested you're not capable of managing your own affairs? Let's just say I'm planning for all contingencies. Well, they'd need to prove diminished capacity. Usually that requires medical evidence, documented incidents of poor judgment, maybe testimony from people close to you. People close to me. Like my children. Dave, I want you to prepare some paperwork for me. Nothing dramatic, just some options. Can you come by tomorrow? Of course. Robert, is everything all right? I looked at the family photos lining my mantle, graduations, weddings, grandchildren's birthdays. Pictures of a life I'd thought was built on love, but was apparently constructed on something far more fragile. Everything's perfect, Dave. I'm just finally learning the difference between being a father and being a bank account. As I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 5 years of widowhood clarity. My children thought they were playing chess with a foolish old man. They had no idea I was about to change the game entirely. Dave Peterson arrived at my house the next morning carrying a leather briefcase that had seen better days, much like both of us. We'd known each other for 15 years, ever since Linda's cancer diagnosis forced me to get serious about financial planning. Back then, we were 2 men in our 50s, worried about providing for our families. Now, we were 2 men in our late 60s, and only one of us still had a family worth protecting. "Coffee," I offered, leading him to the kitchen table where Linda used to pay bills every Sunday morning. "Black, thanks." Dave settled into her chair without thinking, then caught himself. "Sorry, Robert. I didn't mean to." "It's fine." She'd want her chair to be useful. I poured 2 cups from the pot I'd learned to make for 1. "So, what are my options?" Dave opened his briefcase with the deliberate movements of a man who'd delivered difficult news before. "Well, the good news is that your accounts are all in your name only. No joint ownership with the kids, no power of attorney arrangements. The bad news is that if they can prove cognitive decline, they could petition for guardianship." What would that require? Medical testimony, evidence of impaired judgment testimony from family members about concerning behavior. He looked up at me over his reading glasses. "Robert, what exactly happened yesterday?" I told him everything. The overheard conversation, the family meeting, their carefully prepared presentation about my future. As I spoke, Dave's expression shifted from professional concern to something closer to disgust. They actually brought brochures, color brochures, with floor plans. Dave shook his head. "In 30 years of financial planning, I've seen a lot of family greed. But this is sophisticated. They're not just after your money, Robert. They're trying to take control of your life." He was right, of course, but sitting there in Linda's kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of the life we'd built together, I realized something my children didn't understand. They weren't just stealing from their father. They were stealing from their mother's memory. "Dave, let me tell you a story about that 401k they're so interested in." I walked to the cabinet where Linda used to keep her recipe box and pulled out a shoebox I hadn't opened in years. Inside were 35 years of pay stubs, contribution statements, and sacrifice. 1989, I said, pulling out a faded document. Jake was 4, Ashley was 2, Emma was just born. Linda was on unpaid maternity leave, and I was making $32,000 a year at Boeing. The company started the 401k program, and everyone said I was crazy to contribute when we could barely afford groceries. I handed Dave the first contribution statement, $50 a month. It might as well have been $500. But Linda said, "Bobby, we can eat beans and rice if it means the kids won't have to worry about money when they're older." Dave studied the document. "You started contributing immediately even with 3 young kids, especially with 3 young kids." I pulled out another statement. 1993. Ashley needed surgery to correct her lazy eye. Insurance covered most of it, but we still owed $4,000. You know what I didn't do? I didn't raid the 401k. I took a second job cleaning office buildings at night. The memories came flooding back as I sorted through the papers. Nights when I'd come home from Boeing at 5:30, eat dinner with the family, help with homework, then drive to downtown Denver to vacuum offices until midnight. Linda would wait up for me sometimes, falling asleep on the couch with a book in her lap. 1997. I continued, finding another statement. Jake wanted to play travel hockey. $8,000 a year. You know what Linda said, we'll find a way. So I started working Saturdays at a friend's construction company. Every weekend for 3 years, framing houses and pouring concrete so my son could chase his dreams. Dave was quiet, letting me tell my story. 2001. I said, my voice catching slightly. Ashley wanted to go to private high school. Holy family, $15,000 a year. Linda had gone back to work part-time as a substitute teacher, but it wasn't enough. So I started tutoring nights, teaching basic math to adults getting their GEDs. $20 an hour, 3 nights a week for 4 years. I found the college tuition records next. 4 years at University of Colorado for Jake, 3.5 years at Denver University for Ashley, before she dropped out to find herself. And 5 years at Colorado State for Emma, who changed majors 3 times. $230,000, I said, adding up the totals in my head. That's what their education cost. Know how much came from the 401k zero. I took loans, worked overtime. Linda substitute taught full-time even when her rheumatoid arthritis made standing painful. But we never touched the retirement money. Dave looked at the pile of documents spread across Linda's table. Robert, your kids know about all this. They lived it. They just chose not to remember it. I pulled out the medical bills next. The file was thicker than all the others combined. 2015, I said quietly. Linda's diagnosis, stage 3 breast cancer. Our insurance was good, but not perfect. Co-pays, experimental treatments, medications that cost $300 a pill. The oncologist recommended a specialist in Houston. Know what that cost? $30,000 for 6 weeks of treatment. And you still didn't touch the 401k. I borrowed against the house. Put a second mortgage on the home we'd finally paid off after 25 years. Linda cried when we signed the papers, not because of the cancer, but because she felt guilty about the debt. The final file contained the funeral expenses. Even in death, Linda had tried to save money, requesting the simplest service possible. It still cost $12,000. After the funeral, I continued, Jake asked me if I needed financial help. Ashley offered to contribute to a memorial fund. Emma suggested we plant a tree in Linda's honor. Sweet gestures, all of them. But you know what none of them asked? They never asked how I'd managed to pay for everything. They never wondered how their father, who'd raised 3 kids and put them through college on a Boeing salary, had managed to care for their dying mother without going bankrupt. Dave leaned back in his chair. The 401k. The 401k that they now think belongs to them. The money Linda and I saved by eating generic cereal and driving used cars. The money we accumulated by choosing sacrifice over comfort for 35 years. I gathered up all the papers and put them back in the shoebox. They see $487,000 and think it fell from the sky. They don't see the second jobs, the overtime, the weekend construction work, the nights Linda and I sat at this table, figuring out how to pay for Jake's hockey equipment or Ashley's dance lessons or Emma's art supplies. What are you going to do? I walked to the window that looked out on my backyard where Linda had planted a garden every spring until she got too sick to tend it. The garden was overgrown now, weeds choking out the perennials she'd loved. I'd let it go wild after she died, unable to face the memories contained in every flower bed. Dave, let me ask you something. If someone worked their entire life to build something beautiful and their own children wanted to tear it down for spare parts, what would you call that? Heartbreaking, I'd call it theft. Not just of money, but of meaning. They want to take the life Linda and I built and turn it into their investment portfolio. I turned back to face him. I want you to help me make some changes to my accounts. Nothing illegal, nothing they can challenge. But I want options. If my children think they can force me into assisted living to get control of my assets, they're about to learn that their old man still has a few moves left. Dave nodded slowly. What kind of options are you thinking about? The kind that remind them that respect isn't inherited, it's earned. As Dave packed up his briefcase, I looked at the shoebox containing 35 years of financial discipline. Tomorrow, I'd decide what to do with the legacy Linda and I had built. Tonight, I'd remember what it had cost us. The grandfather clock in the living room chimed 10 o'clock. Somewhere in Denver, my children were probably starting their workdays, checking their investment portfolios, planning their futures. None of them were thinking about their father sitting alone in the house their sacrifices had helped preserve. That was about to change. Dave, I called as he reached the door. One more thing. I want you to research charitable giving options. Large donations. The kind that come with tax benefits and public recognition. How large are we talking? I smiled for the first time in days. Large enough to get their attention. The email arrived in my inbox at 3:47 p.m. on a Thursday, 48 hours after Dave's visit. It wasn't meant for me. That much was clear from the CC list that included Jake, Ashley, and Emma. But somehow my address had been accidentally included. The sender was someone named Patricia Hoffman Esquire, from Hoffman & Associates estate planning attorneys. Per our consultation yesterday, I prepared the preliminary documents we discussed regarding guardianship proceedings and financial capacity evaluation. Please review the attached timeline and fee schedule. As discussed, the key will be establishing a pattern of concerning behavior and obtaining medical testimony regarding cognitive decline. I read the email 3 times before the full weight of it hit me. While I'd been reminiscing about 35 years of sacrifice, my children had been consulting lawyers about how to take control of my life. The attachment was a PDF titled Guardianship Petition Strategy, Confidential. I opened it with the same sick fascination you might feel watching a car accident in slow motion. The document was thorough, I had to give them that. It outlined a 3-phase approach. Phase 1 involved documenting incidents of poor judgment and financial irresponsibility. Phase 2 required medical evaluation, preferably by a geriatric psychiatrist who specializes in cognitive assessment. Phase 3 was the actual court petition, complete with a timeline suggesting the entire process could be completed within 60 days. But it was the notes section that really twisted the knife. Someone, probably Patricia Hoffman herself, had been taking detailed notes about my case. Subject is 68-year-old widower living alone in 4-bedroom house, valued at approximately $320,000. Children report increasing isolation since wife's death 5 years ago. Refuses to consider assisted living despite family concerns. Sitting on substantial assets, $487K and 401K, plus home equity with no apparent estate planning. They'd done their homework. The financial figures were accurate down to the last $1,000. But it was the next section that made my blood run cold. Documented incidents of concern. 1 refuses to update will or establish healthcare directives. 2 spends increasing time alone, declining social invitations. 3 house maintenance, declining yard work, basic repairs. 4 reportedly becomes emotional when discussing late wife. 5 has not pursued any romantic relationships since wife's death. I set down my reading glasses and laughed at the absurdity of it. They were using my grief as evidence of incompetence. The fact that I missed Linda, that I'd let her garden grow wild because I couldn't bear to touch the flowers she'd planted, that I'd chosen solitude over the awkward dinner parties and book clubs where I'd be the only widower among married couples. All of this was apparently proof that I couldn't manage my own affairs. The phone rang just as I was reading about the recommended medical evaluations. Jake's name appeared on the caller ID. "Hey, Dad, how are you feeling today?" How was I feeling? I was feeling like my eldest son was building a legal case against me while pretending to care about my well-being. "I'm fine, Jake. What can I do for you?" "Well, Ashley and I were talking, and we're concerned that you might be taking on too much living alone in that big house. We thought maybe it would be good for you to talk to someone, professionally." A therapist. They wanted me to see a therapist who would undoubtedly ask about my emotional stability and decision-making capacity. What kind of professional? Just someone to help you process Mom's death. "It's been 5 years, Dad, and we're worried that you're not moving forward." Moving forward? As if grief had a deadline, as if love had an expiration date. "That's thoughtful of you, son, but I'm managing just fine." "Are you, though? When's the last time you had friends over? When's the last time you went somewhere besides the grocery store and church?" I looked around my living room at Linda's books still on the shelves, her reading glasses still on the side table where she'd left them the night before her last hospital admission. My children saw a shrine to the past. I saw home. "Jake, why are you really calling?" The pause was long enough to let me know I'd hit my mark. "Dad, we just want what's best for you, and sometimes people need help making decisions that are in their best interest." There it was. The phrase that would undoubtedly appear in Patricia Hoffman's petition. Unable to make decisions in his best interest. "I appreciate your concern," I said carefully, "but I'm quite capable of making my own decisions." "Of course you are, Dad. We're not saying you aren't. We're just saying that maybe you could use some support, some guidance." After I hung up, I sat in Linda's chair and thought about guidance. I thought about all the guidance I'd given my children over the years. How to tie their shoes, how to ride bikes, how to drive cars, how to balance checkbooks, how to interview for jobs, how to treat people with respect. I'd apparently failed at that last one. The second email arrived 2 hours later. This one was meant for me, sent directly from Emma's personal account. "Dad, I hope you'll forgive me for what I'm about to say, but I'm worried about you. We all are. Yesterday, when we were at your house, you seemed different, confused. You asked the same question twice, and you forgot that Ashley had already told you about her business expansion plans." I hadn't forgotten anything. I'd asked twice because I couldn't believe my daughter was asking me to fund her marketing firm's expansion while simultaneously planning to have me declared incompetent. "I've been reading about early-stage dementia," Emma continued, "and isolation is both a symptom and a risk factor. Dad, I love you too much to watch you deteriorate alone in that house. Please consider talking to Dr. Matthews about some medication that might help with memory and mood." Dr. Matthews, my family physician for the past 12 years, who would be obligated to report any concerning symptoms to my children if they asked. They were building their case methodically, using my own grief and privacy against me. The third piece of evidence arrived via Ashley the next morning. She knocked on my door at 8 a.m., carrying a bag from the local pharmacy and wearing the expression she'd perfected as a teenager when she wanted something. "Morning, Dad. I brought you some vitamins, omega-3s for brain health and some B-complex for energy." She followed me to the kitchen, chattering about antioxidants and cognitive function while I made coffee. But I noticed she was taking pictures with her phone, Pictures of my refrigerator, admittedly sparse since I'd never learned to shop for one. My medicine cabinet, blood pressure medication, and aspirin, my kitchen table covered with mail I hadn't sorted. Dad, when's the last time you paid bills? There's quite a pile here. I pay them online now, Ashley. That's mail I haven't thrown away yet. Online? She looked surprised. Since when do you pay bills online? Since Linda died and I had to learn to manage everything myself, but I didn't say that. Instead, I watched my daughter photograph my concerning living conditions while pretending to care about my vitamin intake. You know, Dad, if managing finances is getting complicated, we could help set up automatic payments or even help you find someone to manage that stuff for you. Someone like them, no doubt. After Ashley left, I called Dave Peterson. Dave, I need to accelerate our timeline. How quickly can we make those charitable donations we discussed? Well, it depends on the amount and the organization. For something substantial, most reputable charities can process donations within a few business days. Why the rush? I told him about the emails, the phone calls, the vitamin visit with its impromptu photo session. Robert, they're building a guardianship case against you. This is serious. I know exactly how serious it is. How much can I donate at once without triggering any reporting requirements that might slow down the process? For cash donations over $10,000, there are IRS forms, but they're routine. For something in the six-figure range, the charity would want to verify the legitimacy of the donation, but that's standard procedure, not a legal obstacle. Good. I want to donate the entire 401k balance to the American Red Cross Disaster Relief Fund. Can we do it by Monday? The silence on the other end stretched long enough for me to wonder if we'd lost connection. Robert, Dave said finally. That's nearly $500,000. Are you absolutely certain about this? I looked at the family photos on my mantle. Jake's college graduation, Ashley's wedding, Emma's promotion celebration. Pictures of children I'd raised to be successful, educated, privileged. Children who were now using that education and privilege to destroy their father. Dave, let me ask you something. If you spent 35 years building something beautiful and the people you loved most wanted to tear it down for parts, wouldn't you rather give it to someone who would use it to build something meaningful? When you put it that way, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Let's do this. As I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Linda's death purpose. My children thought they were playing chess with a grieving old man who'd lost his edge. They had no idea they were about to learn the most expensive lesson of their lives. Sometimes the best way to win a war is to remove the thing everyone's fighting over. And sometimes the thing worth fighting for isn't money at all. It's dignity. The paperwork was signed on Monday morning at 9:15 a.m. Dave Peterson had worked through the weekend to expedite the process, and by the time most people were settling into their work week with their first cup of coffee, I had officially donated $487,000 to the American Red Cross Disaster Relief Fund. The representative from the Red Cross, a kind woman named Maria Santos, had driven to my house personally to complete the transaction. She seemed almost overwhelmed by the size of the donation. Mr. Thompson, this is incredibly generous. This single donation will help us provide emergency shelter, food, and medical care to thousands of families affected by natural disasters. That's exactly what I hope to hear. I told her, signing the final document with Linda's fountain pen. My late wife always said that money sitting idle is money wasted. I can't think of a better way to put this to work. Maria handed me a beautiful certificate acknowledging the donation, along with a letter that would be sent to the Red Cross National Headquarters. You'll be recognized as a major benefactor, and we'd love to invite you to our annual gala in the spring. For the first time in weeks, I felt genuinely happy. This money, which had become a source of family greed and manipulation, would now save lives and rebuild communities destroyed by hurricanes, floods, and wildfires. I spent the rest of Monday crafting an email to my children. I wanted to get the tone exactly right. Not vindictive, not angry, just matter of fact. The truth has a way of speaking for itself when you let it. By Tuesday, I still hadn't sent it. I was waiting for the perfect moment, and as fate would have it, that moment was about to present itself. Emma called Tuesday afternoon to invite me to Thanksgiving dinner at her house. "Dad, Tom and I would love to have you join us this year. The twins are old enough now to really appreciate having Grandpa there, and we're inviting Jake and Ashley too. It'll be like old times. Like old times, when I was still a father, instead of a financial target. That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. What can I bring?" "Just yourself, Dad. Although..." She paused, and I could practically hear the wheels turning. "Actually, maybe this would be a good time for all of us to sit down and talk about some of the things we discussed last week. You know about your future plans and how we can help." Ah. Thanksgiving dinner with a side of guardianship petition. How traditional. Of course, Emma. I'd love to discuss my future plans with everyone. Thursday morning arrived gray and cold, typical Denver November weather. I dressed carefully in my best suit. The navy blue one Linda had helped me pick out for Jake's wedding. If this was going to be my last family dinner as a free man, I wanted to look the part. Emma's house in Cherry Hills Village was everything you'd expect from a pediatric surgeon's home. Impressive, perfectly maintained, and slightly intimidating. The circular driveway could accommodate 6 cars easily, and today it was full. Jake's Tesla, Ashley's Mercedes, and a BMW I didn't recognize that probably belonged to Ashley's latest boyfriend. Tom answered the door wearing a cashmere sweater that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Robert, good to see you. Come in, come in." Emma's in the kitchen putting the finishing touches on everything. The house smelled like turkey and sage, reminding me of Thanksgivings past, when Linda would spend 2 days preparing our modest but loving feast. Emma had clearly ordered from a high-end caterer. Everything was too perfect, too professionally arranged. "Dad?" Emma emerged from the kitchen, looking like a magazine spread, her hair and makeup flawless, despite supposedly spending the morning cooking. She hugged me with the kind of enthusiasm that felt slightly rehearsed. Jake and Ashley were already seated in the living room, drinks in hand, looking like they were at a business meeting rather than a family gathering. Which I suppose they were. "Dad, you look great," Jake said, standing to shake my hand. "Really great. Much better than last week." Much better than last week when they decided I was losing my mental faculties. "Thank you, son. I'm feeling very well. Very clear-headed." We made small talk for the obligatory 15 minutes before Emma announced dinner was ready. The dining room table was set with china I didn't recognize and flowers that had clearly been arranged by a professional. It was beautiful, expensive, and utterly without warmth. Tom said grace, thanking God for family and blessings and the opportunity to gather together. I added my own silent prayer of gratitude. For clarity, for purpose, and for the signed paperwork sitting in my car's glove compartment. The conversation during dinner was carefully orchestrated. They asked about my health, my sleep, my social activities, or lack thereof. Every question felt like a deposition. Every answer potentially used as evidence later. "Dad," Ashley said as we finished the main course, "we've all been thinking about our conversation last week, and we wanted to follow up on some of those retirement community options." "Actually," Jake added, "we've scheduled a visit to that place in Highlands Ranch for next Tuesday. We thought you might like to see it." They'd scheduled a visit. Without asking me. That's very thoughtful, I said, cutting my turkey with deliberate precision. But before we discuss my living arrangements, I have something to share with all of you. The table went quiet. Emma stopped serving dessert. Tom paused with his wine glass halfway to his lips. I've made a decision about my 401k, I continued. The money you've all been so concerned about. Dad, Jake said quickly, we're not concerned about the money. We're concerned about you. I know exactly what you're concerned about. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the folded printouts of their lawyer emails. Would you like to explain to Tom and the children what guardianship proceedings are? Ashley's face went white. Emma's perfectly applied lipstick couldn't hide the fact that her mouth had fallen open. Jake looked like he'd been caught cheating on his taxes. Dad, I can explain, Emma started. Please do. Explain to your husband how you've been consulting with Patricia Hoffman about having me declared mentally incompetent. Explain how you've been documenting my concerning behavior, things like missing my dead wife and preferring to live alone rather than in an institution. The silence was deafening. In the distance, I could hear the twins playing video games, blissfully unaware that their grandfather was being ambushed by their parents. Robert, Tom said carefully, I think there might be some misunderstanding here. No misunderstanding, Tom. Would you like to see the email where your wife suggests I need medication for memory and mood problems, or the documentation of my declining house maintenance that apparently makes me unfit to manage my own affairs? Jake found his voice first. Dad, we were just exploring options. We weren't actually going to, file a petition to have me declared incompetent? Because according to Patricia Hoffman's timeline, you could have me in court by Christmas. Ashley started crying. Not the genuine tears of remorse, but the manipulative tears she'd perfected in childhood when caught lying. Daddy, we were scared. We thought you might be getting sick, and we didn't want you to. To what, Ashley, waste your inheritance on nursing home care? Spend your money on something frivolous, like, I don't know, living. Emma slammed her wineglass down hard enough to splash red wine across her white tablecloth. That's not fair, Dad. That's not what this is about. Then what is it about, Emma? Because from where I sit, it looks like 3 successful adults who've decided their widowed father is too stupid and too sad to manage the money he earned over 35 years of work. We love you, Jake said desperately. We just want to take care of you. The way I took care of all of you, working 2 jobs so Jake could play hockey, borrowing against the house so Ashley could go to private school, taking out a second mortgage to pay for Emma's college when she changed majors 3 times. I stood up, my napkin falling to the floor. You want to take care of me? Here's how you can take care of me. You can respect my choices. You can trust my judgment. And you can stop treating me like a bank account with a beating heart. Dad, please sit down, Emma said. We can work this out. We already have. I reached into my other pocket and pulled out the donation certificate from the Red Cross. As of Monday morning, I donated the entire 401k balance to disaster relief. $487,000, every penny. The color drained from every face at the table. Ashley stopped crying. Jake's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Emma looked like she might faint. You did what? Jake whispered. I gave it away. To people who will use it to save lives instead of destroy families. Dad, Ashley said, her voice shaking, you can't be serious. That was our inheritance. That was the twins' college fund. That was my money, I said quietly. Money. I earned money. I saved money your mother and I accumulated through 35 years of sacrifice. It was never yours to count on, and it certainly wasn't yours to steal through legal manipulation. Tom, who had been silent through this entire exchange, finally spoke up. Robert, surely there's some way to reverse a charitable donation to disaster victims. Tell me, Tom, would you like to explain to your children that Grandpa tried to take food away from hurricane survivors so they could inherit more money? Emma burst into tears. Real ones this time. Dad, how could you do this to us? How could you give away everything we've worked for? Everything you've worked for. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Emma, you're married to a man who makes $400,000 a year. Ashley, you own a successful business. Jake, you drive a Tesla. What exactly have you worked for that you don't already have? Security, Jake said desperately. Our children's futures, retirement planning. Then plan it with your own money, the way your mother and I did. I walked toward the door, then turned back to face my 3 children and their horrified expressions. You know what the saddest part of this is. I would have given you anything if you'd just asked. If you'd come to me with respect instead of lawyers. If you'd treated me like a father instead of a problem to be solved. Daddy, please, Ashley said, reaching toward me. We can fix this. We can make this right. You're absolutely right, I said, opening the front door. You can fix this. You can learn to live with the consequences of your choices. You can learn that love isn't something you inherit. It's something you earn. As I walked to my truck, I could hear raised voices from inside the house. Accusations, blame, panic. I imagined they were already calling Patricia Hoffman, asking if there was any way to challenge a charitable donation, any legal avenue to pursue. Let them try. Let them explain to a judge why disaster relief victims should give back money. So that entitled children could inherit wealth they'd tried to steal through guardianship proceedings. I drove home through the quiet streets of Denver, past houses where families were gathering for Thanksgiving dinner, where children were grateful for their parents instead of plotting against them. For the first time since Linda's death, I felt truly thankful. Not for what I had, but for what I'd learned, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is teach your children that actions have consequences. Even when they're too old to be grounded, they're never too old to learn respect. The phone started ringing at 6:47 a.m. the morning after Thanksgiving. I know the exact time because I was lying in bed watching the sunrise paint Linda's side of the bedroom in soft gold light when Jake's name flashed across my phone screen for the first time. I let it go to voicemail. The second call came 3 minutes later. Ashley this time, then Emma, then Jake again. By 7:15 a.m., I had 11 missed calls and a voicemail box that was probably full of threats, pleas, and accusations. I made myself coffee in Linda's favorite mug, the one that said, "World's Greatest Mom," that Emma had given her for Mother's Day when she was 7. It seemed appropriate somehow to drink my victory coffee from a gift given back when my children still loved unconditionally. The 12th call came as I was reading the morning paper. This time, it wasn't one of my children. It was Patricia Hoffman Esquire. I answered on the 4th ring. Mr. Thompson, this is Patricia Hoffman from Hoffman & Associates. I represent your children in some estate planning matters, and I need to speak with you urgently about a financial transaction you made this week. Good morning, Ms. Hoffman. I assume my children told you about my charitable donation. Mr. Thompson, I need to be very direct with you. Your children are extremely concerned about your mental state, and this donation appears to confirm their worst fears about your judgment. I almost laughed. My mental state, because I chose to give my own money to disaster relief instead of letting it be stolen through fraudulent guardianship proceedings. The pause on the other end told me everything I needed to know. She hadn't expected me to know about their legal strategy. "Mr. Thompson, no one is trying to steal anything. Your children are genuinely worried about your capacity to make major financial decisions. A donation of nearly $500,000 to a charity you've never supported before raises serious questions about Ms. Hoffman, my right to spend my own money as I see fit. About whether you're being influenced by outside parties or whether you're experiencing cognitive decline that affects your judgment." I set down my coffee and walked to the window. Across the street, my neighbor was raking leaves in his yard, performing the kind of mundane weekend task that my children apparently saw as evidence of competence. "Ms. Hoffman, let me save you some time. I'm 68 years old, not 98. I'm a retired Boeing engineer with a master's degree in mechanical engineering and 35 years of complex problem-solving experience. I've been managing my own finances since before your clients were born, and I've never missed a payment, defaulted on a loan, or made a financial decision I later regretted. Mr. Thompson, I'm not finished. The donation I made was carefully considered, legally executed, and morally justified. It went to one of the most respected charitable organizations in America, and it will save lives. If you think a judge will find that decision evidence of incompetence, I suggest you reconsider your legal strategy. Your children are prepared to pursue guardianship proceedings if necessary. Let them try. But I should mention that I've retained my own attorney, and we have some very interesting evidence about their motives, including emails discussing how to build a case against me and documented attempts to gather evidence of my supposed incompetence." The silence stretched long enough for me to wonder if she'd hung up. "Mr. Sir Thompson," she said finally, "perhaps we could arrange a meeting. Your children love you very much, and I'm sure we can find a solution that works for everyone. Ms. Hoffman, I had 3 children who loved me very much. What I have now are 3 adults who saw dollar signs instead of a grieving father. There's no solution to that except time and consequences." I hung up and immediately called Dave Peterson. "Dave, I just got a call from their attorney. They're doubling down on the guardianship threat." "Robert, I've been expecting this. I spent yesterday researching their legal options, and honestly, they don't have much of a case. Your donation was legal, well documented, and made to a legitimate charity. Unless they can prove you were coerced or mentally incompetent at the time of the transaction, there's nothing they can do. And can they prove that, based on what, that you live alone by choice? That you grieve your wife? That you prefer privacy to social activities? Robert, half the widowers in America would be declared incompetent by those standards." The relief I felt was overwhelming. For the first time since this nightmare began, I realized I might actually win. "There's something else," Dave continued. "I got a call this morning from Maria Santos at the Red Cross. Apparently your donation is big enough to trigger their major donor recognition process. They want to do a feature story about you in their newsletter, and the local news stations are interested in covering the story." News stations? Think about it, Robert. Local widower donates life savings to disaster relief. It's exactly the kind of feel-good story they love, especially around the holidays. And it would be pretty hard for your children to claim you're incompetent when you're being celebrated as a community hero. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done since Linda's funeral. I called my brother Michael in Phoenix. "Bobby, what a surprise. How are you holding up?" Michael was 2 years older than me, a retired electrician who'd raised 4 kids on a working-class salary and somehow managed to keep them all grounded and grateful. He'd flown in for Linda's funeral, and we'd talked about getting together more often, but life had a way of making good intentions complicated. "Michael, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without judgment." I told him everything. The family meeting, the lawyer, emails, the Thanksgiving confrontation, the donation. When I finished, the silence on the other end lasted so long I thought we'd lost connection. "Jesus, Bobby," he said finally. "Your kids really did that. They really did. And you gave away $500,000. I did. Good for you." I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear those words from someone who shared my DNA. "You think I did the right thing? I think you did the only thing. Bobby, when we were kids, Dad used to say that respect is earned, not inherited. Sounds like your kids forgot that lesson." We talked for another hour about family, about loss, about the difference between love and entitlement. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: support from family who actually cared about my well-being instead of my bank account. The next few days passed in a blur of phone calls and paperwork. Patricia Hoffman tried twice more to reach me, each call more desperate than the last. Jake showed up at my house Sunday morning, but I watched through the window as he knocked and rang the doorbell, and I didn't answer. Ashley sent a long email that I deleted without reading. Emma left voicemails that I could hear, were tear-filled even without listening to them. On Tuesday, Maria Santos called with news that changed everything. "Mr. Thompson, I have some wonderful news. Your donation has inspired 3 other major donors to step forward. Because of your gift, we've been able to fund a complete emergency response center in Miami that will serve hurricane victims for years to come. The regional director wants to fly in from Atlanta to meet you personally." "That's incredible, Maria. There's more. Channel 7 News wants to do a feature story about your donation for their holiday series on community heroes. They'd like to interview you Friday afternoon if you're willing." I thought about Jake, Ashley, and Emma watching their father on the evening news, being praised for the decision they'd called evidence of mental incompetence. I'd be honored. The interview was scheduled for 2 p.m. Friday at the Red Cross Regional Headquarters. That morning, I did something I hadn't done since Linda's death. I went shopping for new clothes. At Nordstrom, a young salesman named David helped me pick out a navy blue suit that actually fit properly, a crisp white shirt, and a tie that Linda would have approved of. As he was ringing up the purchase, he asked what the occasion was. "I'm being interviewed on the news," I told him. "Wow, that's exciting. What for?" "For giving away my retirement savings to charity." David looked confused. That's really generous, sir." "But why is that news out of the mouths of 20-somethings? Why was generosity news? Because it was so rare that when someone chose compassion over greed, it was worth celebrating. Because sometimes, I told him, doing the right thing is unusual enough to be newsworthy. Friday afternoon, I sat in the Red Cross conference room across from reporter Sarah Chen with Maria Santos beside me and cameras rolling. The interview was supposed to last 15 minutes. We talked for 45. "Mr. Thompson," Sarah asked, "what made you decide to donate your entire retirement savings to disaster relief?" I looked directly into the camera, knowing that somewhere in Denver, 3 adults were probably watching their father explain why helping strangers was more important than enabling spoiled children. My late wife always taught me that money sitting idle is money wasted. When I realized I had more than I needed, and there were people who had lost everything, the choice was obvious. But this was your life savings. Didn't you worry about your own financial security? I worried more about what that money was doing to my family than what giving it away would do to me. I didn't elaborate, but I didn't need to. The look in my eyes probably said everything that needed to be said about children who value inheritance over integrity. The story aired that evening during the 6 o'clock news. I watched it alone in my living room, in Linda's chair with a glass of wine we'd been saving for a special occasion. My phone rang exactly 7 minutes after the story ended. Jake's name on the caller ID. This time I answered. "Hi, son." "Dad." His voice was quiet, different somehow. "I saw the news. And I'm ashamed. We're all ashamed." It was the first time in months that Jake had sounded like my son instead of a plaintiff's attorney. "I know you are." "Dad, is there anything we can do to make this right?" I looked at Linda's picture on the mantel, at the woman who taught me that love means wanting the best for someone even when they don't deserve it. "Jake, there's always a way to make things right. But it starts with understanding what went wrong." For the first time since this whole mess began, I heard something in my son's voice that gave me hope, genuine remorse. "Can we start over?" he asked. "We can try," I said. "But this time we do it as family, not as adversaries." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning. And sometimes, a beginning is the best gift you can give someone you love. 3 weeks after the news interview aired, Patricia Hoffman made her last desperate move. The legal papers were served on a Tuesday morning by a sheriff's deputy who looked embarrassed to be delivering them. "Petition for emergency guardianship and financial conservatorship," the document read. "Based on documented evidence of cognitive decline and recent erratic financial behavior, demonstrating clear and present danger to the ward's welfare." I read it twice while standing on my front porch, then invited the deputy in for coffee. "Sir, I just served the papers," Deputy Martinez said, declining politely. "But between you and me, I saw your interview on Channel 7. My wife and I thought what you did was pretty incredible." "Thank you, Deputy. That means more than you know." After he left, I called Dave Peterson and read him the petition over the phone. "Robert, this is actually good news. Good news they're trying to have me declared incompetent. Yes, but they're doing it 3 weeks after you were featured on television as a community hero for making a thoughtful charitable donation. Plus, they filed this right after your story inspired other major donors. The timing makes them look vindictive rather than concerned." Dave was right. The petition was a masterpiece of poor judgment, filed by children who clearly hadn't thought through the optics of attacking their father's mental capacity immediately after he'd been publicly praised for his generosity. The court date was set for December 18th. I had exactly 3 weeks to prepare. My first call was to Dr. Sarah Matthews, my family physician. "Doc, I need a comprehensive cognitive evaluation, full battery of tests. I want everything documented. Robert, is everything all right? You seem as sharp as ever to me." "I'm fine, but my children are trying to have me declared incompetent, and I want medical evidence that says otherwise." The silence on the other end was telling. "Your children are doing what? Long story. Can you fit me in this week?" "Come in tomorrow. And Robert, bring a list of your medications and any documentation you have about this legal proceeding. I may need to refer you to a specialist for more comprehensive testing." My second call was to Maria Santos at the Red Cross. "Maria, I need a favor. My children are challenging my mental competency in court using my donation as evidence. Would the Red Cross be willing to provide testimony about my decision-making process?" "Mr. Thompson, I'd be happy to testify. Your donation was one of the most well-thought-out and professionally handled transactions I've ever processed. You asked intelligent questions, understood all the implications, and followed proper procedures. I'll gladly tell a judge that." My third call surprised even me. I dialed the number for Hoffman and Associates. "Ms. Hoffman, this is Robert Thompson. I want to make you an offer." "Mr. Thompson, I really think you should have an attorney present for any—" "I don't need an attorney to tell you that you're about to make a fool of yourself in court. But I'm willing to give your clients one chance to withdraw this petition gracefully." What kind of offer? I'll agree to family mediation. Neutral, third party, no lawyers, just a conversation about how we move forward as a family. If my children can convince an independent mediator that I'm incompetent, I'll voluntarily enter financial conservatorship. The pause told me I'd caught her off guard. And if they can't, then they withdraw the petition, fire you, and we try to rebuild our relationship without legal threats hanging over it. I'll discuss it with my clients and get back to you. She never called back. The mediation offer was apparently too reasonable for people who preferred the nuclear option. The cognitive evaluation took 4 hours and covered everything from basic memory tests to complex problem-solving scenarios. Dr. Matthews also referred me to Dr. Michael Chen, a neuropsychologist who specialized in capacity evaluations for legal proceedings. Dr. Chen's tests were even more comprehensive. For 6 hours, I answered questions, solved puzzles, demonstrated recall, and explained my reasoning for various hypothetical decisions, including charitable giving scenarios remarkably similar to my actual donation. Mr. Thompson, Dr. Chen said afterward, your cognitive function is not only normal for your age, it's above average. Your reasoning skills, judgment capacity, and decision-making processes all test in the superior range. Whoever suggested you're experiencing cognitive decline has either been misinformed or is being deliberately deceptive. 2 weeks before the court date, something unexpected happened. Emma showed up at my door alone, carrying a manila envelope. Dad, can we talk? She looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, her usually perfect appearance disheveled, her confidence completely gone. Of course, sweetheart. Come in. We sat in the living room where this whole mess had started. Emma in her mother's chair, me in mine. Dad, I need to show you something. She opened the envelope and pulled out a thick stack of papers. These are the bills from Patricia Hoffman's firm. We've paid her $18,000 so far, and she says we'll need at least another $20,000 to fight this properly. I looked at the legal bills, noting the hourly rates and billable hours. That's a lot of money, Emma. It's more than Tom and I spend on groceries in a year. And for what, to prove that my father is crazy for giving money to hurricane victims? She started crying. Not the manipulative tears from Thanksgiving, but genuine anguish. Dad, I can't do this anymore. What changed your mind? Everything. The news interview, the letters we've gotten from people who saw the story, the way my friends look at me when they ask about my family. She wiped her eyes with a tissue. But mostly it was something Tom said. What did Tom say? He asked me how I'd feel if our twins grew up and tried to have us declared incompetent because we gave money to charity. He asked me if that's the kind of children we were raising. I felt something crack open in my chest. Not quite forgiveness, but the possibility of it. Emma, why didn't Jake and Ashley come with you? Jake wanted to, but he's too proud. Ashley is still angry and thinks we should fight. She says if we don't get the money back, we're setting a precedent that you can just give away our inheritance whenever you feel like it. Your inheritance. I know how that sounds, Dad. I know how all of this sounds. She leaned forward, her voice urgent. Dad, I want to withdraw from the petition. I want Jake to withdraw too. I want us to go back to being a family. What about Ashley? Emma's face fell. Ashley hired her own lawyer. She's going forward with the guardianship petition, even if Jake and I drop out. 1 out of 3. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. Emma, if you're serious about withdrawing, you need to do it officially, in writing, with copies to the court. I already did. She pulled another document from the envelope. I filed it yesterday. Jake filed his withdrawal this morning. I read the legal documents properly notarized and filed with the court. My youngest daughter and my son were officially stepping back from their attempt to control my life. Dad, is there any way you can forgive us? I looked at this young woman who looked so much like her mother when Linda was upset. Emma had made terrible choices, but she'd also found the courage to admit her mistakes and change course. Emma, forgiveness isn't something that happens all at once. It's something you earn over time through consistent actions that prove you've learned from your mistakes. How do I do that? By showing me that you respect my choices even when you don't understand them. By treating me like your father instead of your financial advisor. By remembering that love doesn't come with strings attached. The court hearing for Ashley's petition was held on a gray December morning in Jefferson County District Court. I arrived with Dave Peterson and my medical evaluations. Ashley arrived with Patricia Hoffman and a briefcase full of evidence. Judge Rebecca Martinez, no relation to the sheriff's deputy, was a woman in her 50s who'd clearly seen every type of family dysfunction the legal system could produce. Ms. Hoffman, Judge Martinez said, "Please present your evidence that Mr. Thompson lacks the capacity to manage his financial affairs." For the next hour, Patricia Hoffman argued that my decision to live alone, my limited social activities, my attachment to my deceased wife's belongings, and my impulsive charitable donation all indicated cognitive decline and poor judgment. Then Dr. Chen took the stand and methodically dismantled every aspect of their argument with test results, evaluation scores, and professional opinions that painted me as mentally sharper than most people half my age. Maria Santos testified that my donation was the result of careful planning and thoughtful consideration, not impulsive behavior. Dave Peterson presented financial records showing 40 years of responsible money management and no history of poor financial decisions. Finally, Judge Martinez asked if I wanted to speak on my own behalf. Your Honor, I spent 35 years working as an engineer solving complex problems and making decisions that affected public safety. I raised 3 children, put them through college, and cared for my dying wife without making a single financial mistake. I'm being accused of incompetence because I chose to help disaster victims instead of enabling adult children who tried to manipulate me through legal threats. I looked directly at Ashley sitting next to her lawyer. Your Honor, the real question isn't whether I'm competent to make financial decisions. The real question is whether we've created a legal system that allows children to steal from their parents by claiming concern for their welfare. Judge Martinez deliberated for exactly 12 minutes. Petition denied. Mr. Thompson clearly possesses full capacity to manage his financial affairs. Furthermore, the court finds the timing and motivation of this petition highly suspect. Ms. Hoffman, I'm sanctioning you for filing a frivolous action, and I'm ordering your clients to pay Mr. Thompson's legal costs. Ashley walked out of the courtroom without looking at me. Patricia Hoffman packed her briefcase in silence. I walked out a free man with my dignity intact and my decisions validated. 6 months later, I received an invitation to the Red Cross annual gala in Washington, D.C. They were giving me their highest civilian honor for philanthropic service. Emma and Tom flew out for the ceremony. Jake met us there. Ashley wasn't invited. During my acceptance speech, I talked about Linda, about the lessons she'd taught me about love and sacrifice, and about the difference between giving freely and having something taken from you. My late wife used to say that money is like water. It's only valuable when it's flowing. When it sits stagnant, it becomes poisonous. This award doesn't belong to me. It belongs to every person who chooses compassion over comfort, giving over getting, love over legacy. After the ceremony, Jake pulled me aside. Dad, I need you to know something. The last 6 months, living with what we almost did to you, it's been the hardest thing I've ever experienced. But it taught me something important. What's that, son? That being your child isn't about what I inherit from you. It's about what I learn from you. Emma nodded in agreement. Dad, we want to set up a family charitable fund in Mom's name. We want to continue what you started. I looked at my 2 youngest children who'd found their way back to the values Linda and I had tried to teach them. I'd like that very much. Today I'm 71 years old. I live alone in the house Linda and I shared, but I'm not lonely. I volunteer at the Red Cross 3 days a week, helping coordinate disaster relief efforts. Emma and Jake visit regularly, not because they want something, but because they want to give something. Their time, their presence, their love. Ashley and I haven't spoken since the court hearing. I hope someday she'll find her way back to the person she used to be. But I've learned that you can't force someone to grow up. You can only model what maturity looks like and hope they notice. The Linda Thompson Memorial Fund has donated over $200,000 to disaster relief in its first year. Emma manages the fund. Jake handles the technology, and I provide the wisdom that comes from understanding the difference between having money and being rich. My 401k is gone, but my legacy is secure. Not in bank accounts or real estate, but in children who learned that integrity matters more than inheritance. That family is defined by love rather than law. And that sometimes the most generous thing you can do is teach people that respect isn't automatic. It's earned. Linda would be proud. And for the first time since she died, so am I. Thank you for following this journey with me. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, family isn't about what you inherit, it's about what you learn. Until next time, choose love over legacy.